Water is a very precious commodity.
Florida is the most aggressive.
2 major hurricanes hit us last year. Very much a partner as opposed to an adversary. We work very hard to respect the environmental mandates, the only drought-proof supply of water.
Can you imagine what life would be like if you did not have a desalination plant?
Treat this resource as a collective treasure. We closed the plant for this work, and then we went into a drinking water emergency. So we were really hit with a double whammy.
Welcome to the Salty Water Podcast today. As we all know, the world has been adopting reverse osmosis plants worldwide on an exponential basis. But here in North America, we only have 2 major seawater plants providing municipal water. One is in Carlsbad, California, and San Diego, and the other is the Tampa Bay plant, which is right here in Tampa. It was the first seawater reverse osmosis plant to provide municipal water. And today we're going to catch up on how the Tampa plant is doing and how it fits into the broader regional water supply picture. And to do that, we have the person in charge of that plant. It's Hillsborough County Commissioner Harry Cohen, who also serves as the chairman of Tampa Bay Water. He's a Tampa native, graduate of Gettysburg College and New York School of Law. His public service includes many years in the government roles, including as an elected official. He served on the Tampa City Council from 2011 to 2019, and he's currently a Hillsborough County Commissioner, a position he's held since 2020. He's had many other public service roles in infrastructure and regional planning, but most importantly for today's discussion, he's the chairman of Tampa Bay Water. Tampa Bay Water was created in 1998 by local agreement and under state of Florida charter to plan and provide for and serve wholesale potable water needs for the now over 2.6 million people in the region. It uses a blend of groundwater, surface water, and the desalination plant. There's a 9-member board made up of representatives from the member counties and cities. And as I said, Commissioner Cohen is currently the chairman. Regarding the desalination plant, it was conceptualized over 25 years ago. And after a bumpy procurement construction process, started reliably producing 25 million gallons a day of fresh water on a seasonal basis in 2007. Tampa Bay Water has recently taken actions that suggest a long-term commitment to the plant by extending the plant operator contract through 2029 and completing refurbishment of the membrane rack, mechanical equipment, and control systems. Welcome, Commissioner Cohen. We're glad to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be with you.
So you've had you've lived your whole life in Tampa. You've been in public service for a long time. You've seen substantial growth in the population and economic development of the region over that time. From your position as a long-term public official concerned with and involved in the regional planning and infrastructure development, how would you characterize the current challenges to regional water supply?
Well, I think that for a region that has been growing so rapidly and has undergone such tremendous change in the last couple of decades, water is one of the areas where I think we've really done a good job of working as a region, thinking collectively, making sure that we're making plans that look to the growth for the future. And that can be contrasted with, for example, transportation, where that's really to some degree our Achilles heel. We haven't made a lot of the investments that we needed to make in transportation infrastructure, and we're seeing the results of that. With water, that's not the case. With water, we are constantly looking for how we can find and grow the sources that we already have, and we rely on a mixture of things so that we're not totally dependent on any one supply source.
So what are those supply sources and how do they all fit into the picture?
Well, it's groundwater, it's surface water, which mainly comes from the Hillsborough River, and it's our desalination plant. Those are the 3 major sources of water that we have. The groundwater mainly comes from wells that tap into the Florida aquifer, and the surface water, of course, comes from the Hillsborough and to a lesser degree the Alafia River, and the desal, I think, makes up about 10% of the total supply.
Many people probably who don't live in Florida are not aware of the sort of quasi-state, quasi-regional regulatory body called SWFMD, the Southwest Florida Water Management District, which has as part of its mandate protecting the groundwater and also, stimulating and financing and supporting other sources. So in your position at Tampa Bay Water, how do you see SWFMD and sort of the environmental priorities working with or against the water supply needs of the region?
Well, I think that we work very much hand in glove. SWIFMUD, of course, regulates how much water we are allowed to withdraw from the groundwater sources, and we have bumped up right against the permit limits that SWIFMUD has set. What has happened when that happens is that they work with us to either increase the permit amounts or to allow us to take water from other sources. And I think that they are very much a partner as opposed to an adversary. And we work very hard to respect the environmental mandates that they set out. At the same time, we rely on them. For example, right now we are a little bit behind in the amount of rainfall that we've had this season, and they are the ones that will ultimately make the decision if we have to go from 2 day a week to 1 day a week watering. And if they do that, we will be the ones to make sure that that gets implemented. During our last period of a semi-drought, which was in the period right before the two major hurricanes that hit us last year, SwiftMud did take that action. And what we found is that it made a tremendous difference in our water consumption. Our figures show us that 50% of the potable water use in our region is used for irrigation.
Okay.
And so going from 2 day a week to 1 day a week watering actually has a very, very significant effect on our water consumption.
That's interesting. And as you say, we're almost in a drought cycle now with quite a dry period through this, what's supposed to be the rainy season this year. So do you see these things becoming real again in the near future
I do.
as we enter the dry season?
I do. And I would expect in the next couple of months, I'd be very surprised if Swift Mud didn't take that initial action to restrict the watering. And when they lifted that the last time, some jurisdictions decided to go ahead and leave it in place. The city of Tampa did that. Hillsborough County did not, but I'm not sure if it happens again that we won't follow what the city of Tampa did, because as you're aware, and as I'm sure your listeners are aware, water is a very precious commodity, and anything that we can do to encourage conservation on the front end helps us avoid spending additional money on the back end. We need to use our water very, very wisely.
Sure. And I think, again, many people may not know that Florida is the most aggressive and has the largest water reuse program of any state in the country, including Texas and California, is really a leader. I know that's not your particular area of jurisdiction, but there's also a lot of progress right on the water reuse side and using some of that water for public irrigation.
Yes, absolutely. And particularly in the city of Tampa, they've made a lot of really great strides in terms of making reclaimed water available to people who wish to hook up to it.
Yeah. Coming back to the desalination plant, you indicated it provides about 10% of the supply. Can you talk a little bit about how it's come to really fit into the overall picture and how important it is? I mean, could you imagine what life would be like in water resources planning for Tampa Bay Water if you did not have a desalination plant to work with? So has it proven itself over the 20 years and has become an integral part of the system?
Oh, it's definitely an integral part of the system. And when I talk to people about water generally, one of the things that I stress is that we don't have a challenge of we're not going to run out of water. That is not our problem because we have the variety of sources that we're drawing from. And having the desalination capability means we can always, in an emergency type situation, ramp up the supply of desalinated water. The flip side, it is more expensive than groundwater and surface water. So in our current iteration, it only provides about 10% of our use. but it's there as an option should we need it, which is a very, very important backstop against a serious water crisis.
Right.
Obviously, if we're having plenty of rain, it makes sense to use surface water and depend on it more because it's cheaper. But when the river levels go down, you have to have a backup. And if you wouldn't have desalination, you would have to purchase the water somewhere, and that becomes very, very expensive.
Right.
So as a result, we've invested in this plant and we've refurbished it recently, and we're continuing to look at ways that it can be expanded.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the future planning? I know that Tampa Bay Water goes through a very formalized process to keep updating the master plan and looking forward over the horizon. And I believe there's some talk of perhaps some brackish water desalination, but are you able to talk a little bit about the future plans for Tampa Bay Water as a whole and how desalination fits into that?
Well, yeah. So we have the three different supplies, and really surface water is the workhorse of the system because we have a 15 billion gallon reservoir where we're able to store excess water for the dry season. But we're continuing to look at the desalination plant for a couple of things. First of all, we are looking at whether or not we can process brackish water through the plant, and we're also looking at whether or not we're going to be able to take water from Lake Tarpon, and whether or not we can take water from Upper Tampa Bay, and whether or not we can use other sources to provide for the desal. So we're sort of on moving on all the three fronts. We are expanding our surface water capacity, we're expanding our groundwater capacity, and we're looking at new sources for the desal. The desal plant took water directly from Tampa Electric Company's cooling water intake, and they've changed that recently. So we had to make modifications in terms of the way that we draw water in. But we're constantly innovating and trying to look at new ways that we can utilize that plant to its best capability. But I think the key is that we're moving on all the fronts. We're not really leaving any source untapped.
Right. Right. That's excellent. Can you speak to the kinds of improvements that you've made most recently? I know, again, being a Tampa resident now myself, I've sort of followed that every year, there's a capital allocation to make improvements in the plant. But it seems like these most recent improvements were a kind of a 20-year retrofit and
Yeah.
upgrading. And some of our listeners might be interested if you can speak to the actual scope of work and what was done in this last round.
Well, what we actually closed down the plant for like a year, and we replaced all of the membranes. So the guts of the plant is essentially brand new now. That was the really the biggest piece of the project. We were able to expand it some, but it really wasn't an expansion project. It was more of a refurbishment project. What ended up happening though is that we closed the plant for this work, and then we went into a drinking water emergency. So we were really hit with a sort of a double whammy in terms of what our need was and the fact that our number one safeguard for dealing with that need was down. But we managed to still manage the supply in such a way that we were able to make it work.
Yeah, I think Tampa is very lucky to have a professional organization as dedicated as Tampa Bay Water. It was, I guess neither of us were around in the late 60s when the whole thing was put together, but it's been a godsend for water resource planning in the region.
Yes. And in addition to bolstering the and refurbishing the desal plant, we are expanding our regional surface water treatment plant by an additional 12.5 million gallons a day. And we've also just received a permit to withdraw additional water from the Alafai River, which can be safely withdrawn without affecting the river levels. We also just recently began construction of a South Hillsborough County water pipeline, which is critically important for moving water into the areas of our county that are growing. And so all that's going on. And we're also looking to perhaps build a new reservoir at some point, because the reservoir, the 15 billion gallon CW Bill Young reservoir, has been a real success also. It's allowed us to store a large amount of water, and there's really no reason that we can't build more of those for just that purpose.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you follow it, but Texas has recently passed a constitutional amendment, which is now dedicating multi-billion-dollar a year fund, part of which is going to be dedicated to desalination plants. Corpus Christi has gone through some fits and starts, first authorizing planning for a project and then withdrawing it and trying to find other sources. There seems to be some resistance at the community level to desalination in Texas. California, while it has the Carlsbad plant, Manhattan Beach, I believe, has resisted large-scale desalination. There are some smaller projects along the coast, but of course, California has a highly sophisticated regulatory regime, which makes it even more expensive but what would your advice as a local official, based upon experience here in Tampa with the desalination plant? What would your thoughts be if you were talking to the mayor of Corpus Christi, or the county commissioner in San Diego County, or I guess Orange County, California, in terms of how successful the desalination plant has been and how integral it is to your system?
Well, I would say, first of all, the most important thing is that it is the only drought-proof supply of water. I think to not have it as part of your portfolio is very, very short-sighted, because even if there's enough surface and groundwater today, there's absolutely no guarantee that that's going to be the case tomorrow. And it is essentially an unlimited supply. And it just, for that reason alone, I think that it's very, very responsible to look to desal as something that should be, part of the system. The second thing I would tell you is that our practice is to blend it with groundwater and surface water. Namely, that's what we do, but we also think that helps with the taste and the quality of the water. We have very safe drinking water. There's nothing about it that's unsafe or unsanitary. It's certainly more popular with the public than some of the wastewater treatment projects that turn wastewater into drinking water. I mean, I know that the last time a major wastewater drinking water project was proposed here in Tampa, it got the nickname toilet to tap, which
Right.
you can imagine did not go over real well with our citizens. And in fact, that was probably, I don't want to say it was an unfair characterization, but it's an exaggerated characterization,
Right.
because in fact, the entire world's water supply really is a circulation
Right.
of reused water. But at the end of the day, desal is something that can act as a guardrail against running out of water. And that is, I think, it just makes it a critical piece of the portfolio if you have access to the salt water itself.
Yeah. And I would also say that the East Bay, where the plant is located, we have manatees and we have dolphins, and there really haven't been any negative environmental effects that I'm aware of from the reject water being put back into the. I know it was also blended with the power plant initially. I'm not sure if they're still using a lot of cooling water, but we have the manatees right next to the power plant, and they're very happy.
Yeah, I'm not aware that it's created any problems in terms of the water quality, but it's obviously something that we monitor very closely. We monitor very closely seagrass levels in the bay, and it's interesting. There are places in Tampa Bay where the seagrass is in an emergency type situation where we're losing seagrass. Interestingly, it's not the area where the desal plant is.
Good.
It's an area where there's a tremendous amount of runoff from roads and cars and human life
Right.
into areas of the bay that don't have natural flows out into the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of coming to the end of our time. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we kind of wrap it up? It's been a pleasure talking with you, but I want to give you a few minutes to say
No,
whatever you want to say.
I really appreciate it. I think that one of the real lessons that I've learned from Tampa Bay Water is that regional cooperation can work. It is hard sometimes to bring different local governments that represent different constituencies to the table and have people agree on things. But we found that with water, people really do understand the need for us all to treat this resource as a collective treasure, as something that belongs to all of us. And we, as a region, take responsibility for providing water to the region. We don't segment the water by artificial borders the way that we necessarily do other things. I mentioned transportation earlier. One of the big challenges with transportation is that we haven't been able to achieve the kind of regional cooperation with that we have with our water system.
Right.
So I would say that water is something that we place such a high priority on, that it's the one area where we really do come together. There's no politics. There's all for one, one for all type of an attitude. Tampa Bay Water had to make a major investment in Hillsborough County recently. Pasco and Pinellas County were right there with us, holding our hands to make sure that we're providing the water that our citizens need. So I think there's some really good lessons to be learned from that.
Well, it's on that upbeat note, it's great to see local government and county and regional government working together for the common good. And in this day and age, that's a wonderful thing.
Well, I appreciate your having me on today. It's a great topic, and I hope that we get, I don't want to see any storms, but some regular rainfall is always welcome in the Tampa Bay area. Every time it rains, I know I'm happy.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. And that wraps it up for today for the Salty Water Podcast. Thank you so much, Commissioner Cohen.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.